Just next time. Next time. Yeah. That's fine. Thank you. Yeah. Hare Krishna. Okay, so Katam svidiyate danda kim vasya stanam ipsitam dandya kim karina sarve ahosvit katichin rinam. So this is verse, Canto 6, Chapter 1, verse 39. So, this is a discussion between the messengers of Lord Vishnu, called the Vishnu Dutas, and the messengers of Yamaraj, called the Yamadutas. Jeez, 1 second. Yes, hello? Yes. Just get 1 gallon, yeah. Thank you. Okay, so the Vishnu Dutas are speaking now to the Yamadutas, and they say, what is the process of punishing others? Who are the actual candidates for punishment? Are all materialists engaged in fruitive activities punishable, or only some of them? So the Vishnu Dutas, the representatives of Lord Vishnu, are questioning the Yamadutas to see how much they know about the laws of karma. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains, one who has the power to punish others should not punish everyone. There are innumerable living entities, the majority of whom are in the spiritual world and are called Nitya Mukta, everlastingly liberated. There is no question of judging these liberated living beings. Only a small fraction of the living entities, perhaps 1/4, are in the material world, and the major portion of the living entities in the material world, 800 million of the 8 million of the 8,400,000 species of life are lower than human beings. Now, this is an interesting point here. Material scientists have identified approximately 1.2 to 1.3 million species of life. But the Vedas claim that there are 8,400,000 species of life. And those include aquatics and insects and plants and birds and mammals and human beings. So out of the 8,400,000 forms of life, or species of life, there are 400,000 different species of human beings. Now, the Vedas don't only speak of the Earth planet. They're speaking to the whole universe. That includes millions of planets in this universe. And that's why the modern scientists have only recognized so far about 1.2 million different species. Okay. And then, so only a fraction of living entities, perhaps 1/4, are in the material world. And the major portion of living entities in the material world, 8 million of the 8.4 million forms of life, are lower than human beings. They are not punishable. So the animals, the plants, the aquatics, and so forth, they're not subject to the law of karma like human beings are, because their development is completely controlled by the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the Devas. It's only the human beings that have limited free will. And according to their limited free will, they have 2 choices. Either they're going to follow Krishna's instructions or not follow them. And they have that latitude. Krishna knows what will happen to people if they follow his instructions, and he knows what's going to happen to people if they don't follow. Just like the state of Washington knows what's going to happen to people who follow the rules of driving, and he also knows, and the state also knows what's going to happen to people if they don't follow the rules. So every human being has limited free will. So now it says, they are not punishable, for under the laws of material nature, they are automatically evolving. So the 8 million species of aquatics, birds, insects, mammals, plants, and so forth, evolve gradually toward the state of human being. And therefore, human beings who are advanced in consciousness are responsible, but not all of them are punishable. Those engaged in advanced pious activities are beyond punishment. Only those who engage in sinful activities are punishable. Therefore, the Vishnu Dutas particularly inquired about who is punishable and why Yamaraj has been designated to discriminate between who is punishable and who is not. How is one to be judged? What is the basic principle of authority? These are the questions raised by the Vishnu Dutas. So, Ajamil died. Ajamil was a very sinful man, but it so happens that at the moment of death, he said the name of Narayana. Now, of course, he wasn't referring to Lord Narayana. He had named his 10th child, a son, Narayana, and he was with his 10th child in some garden when he had this massive heart attack, and he died. And the last thing he said was the name of Narayana, but he was calling his son. But because he said the name of Narayana without any material motive, and he said it with some feeling of love, but it was for his son, the name of Narayana is absolute. So therefore, he was purified of all the terrible sins that he committed, and he committed a lot of sins during his life. And the agents of Yamaraj came to get him and train him for his next material body, which would entail a lot of suffering for all the sins he committed. But they were shocked to see the agents of Lord Vishnu, who refused to let them take Yamaraj's soul. Ajamil's soul. And so this discussion began between them. The agents of Yamaraj didn't understand why they were not letting them take the soul of Ajamil. And although Ajamil was very sinful, because he said the name of Narayana without any material motive, all his sins were purified. So that just shows the power of the name of God. So therefore, this discussion is taking place, and the Vishnu Dutas are questioning the Yamadusas. They say, look, is everybody punishable, or is only those people who have committed sins punishable? So now we'll see what the answers are. The Yamadutas replied, this is the next verse, verse 40. That which is prescribed in the Vedas constitutes Dharma, the religious principles, and the opposite of that is irreligion. The Vedas are directly the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana, and are self-born. This we have heard from Yamaraj. So now the Yamadutas are explaining what they have heard directly from their leader, who is Yamaraj. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains, the servants of Yamaraj replied quite properly. They did not manufacture principles of religion or irreligion. Instead, they explained what they had heard from the authority Yamaraj. Mahajana yenagata sapanta. One should follow the Mahajanas, the authorized persons. Yamaraja is one of the 12 authorities, or Mahajans. Therefore, the servants of Yamaraja, the Yamadutas, replied with perfect clarity when they said, Susruma, we have heard from our authority, Yamaraj. The members of modern civilization manufacture defective religious principles through speculative concoction. This is not Dharma. They do not know what is Dharma and what is Adharma. Therefore, as stated in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, Dharma projita kaitavotra. Dharma not supported by the Vedas is rejected from Srimad Bhagavata Dharma. Bhagavata Dharma comprises only that which is given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Bhagavata Dharma is Sarva Dharma Parityaja Mamekam Saranam Braja. One must accept the authority of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and surrender unto Him, and whatever He says, that is Dharma. Arjuna, for example, thinking that violence was adharma, was declining to fight, but Krishna urged him to fight. Arjuna abided by the orders of Krishna, and therefore he is actually a dharmi, because, in other words, follower of Dharma, because the order of Krishna is Dharma. Dharma means your occupational duty, what you are obliged to do as a servant of God. Krishna says in Bhagavad-Gita, 15th chapter, 15th verse, Vedaischa sarvir aham eva vedya. The real purpose of the Vedic knowledge is to know Krishna himself. One who knows Krishna perfectly is liberated. And Krishna says in Bhagavad-Gita, 4th chapter, 9th verse, Janma karma chame divyam evam yo veti tatvata tyakvadeham punarajanma naiti mameti so Arjuna. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance, Krishna says, and activities, does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. One who understands Krishna and abides by his order is a candidate for returning home back to Godhead. It may be concluded that Dharma, religion, refers to that which is ordered in the Vedas, and Adharma, irreligion, refers to that which is not supported in the Vedas. Dharma is not actually manufactured by Narayana. As stated in the Vedas, Asya Mahato Bhutasya Nisvasitam Etadyad Rigvedaha Iti. The injunctions of Dharma emanate from the breathing of Narayana, the supreme living entity. Narayana exists eternally and breathes eternally, and therefore Dharma, the injunctions of Narayana, also exist eternally. Srila Madhvacharya, the original Acharya for those who belong to the Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya, says, Vedanam pratamo vakta harir eva yato vibhu ato vishvatmaka vedha iti ahur veda vadina. The transcendental words of the Vedas emanated from the mouth of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the Vedic principles should be understood to be Vaishnava principles, because Vishnu is the origin of the Vedas. The Vedas contain nothing besides the instructions of Vishnu, and one who follows the Vedic principles is a Vaishnava. The Vaishnava is not a member of a manufactured community of this material world. A Vaishnava is a real knower of the Vedas, as confirmed in Bhagavad-Gita, Vedaischa sarvir aham eva vedya. Okay, so in this purport, we see how the Vishnu Dutas answer the Yamadutas answer the Vishnu Dutas. Vishnu Duta means the representatives of Lord Vishnu, and Yamadutas means the representatives of Yamaraj. So the Vishnu Dutas want to see if the followers of Yamaraj actually understand what are the principles of Dharma and what are the principles of karma. Dharma means occupational duties according to one's position. So there are occupational duties for Brahmanas, occupational duties for Kshatriyas, occupational duties for Vaishyas, and occupational duties for Sudras. And if if they follow those duties, then they can attain perfection in the Varnashram Dharma system of social organization. It doesn't matter whether it's one of Sudra or Brahmana. If they follow the rules of their Varna, then they can attain perfection in this lifetime. And the whole purpose of the Varnashram system is that all the different classes of people in society cooperate to serve Lord Krishna. And in that way, everybody makes spiritual advancement. Just like in the body, you have the legs, you have the stomach, you have the arms, you have the tongue and the mouth, and then you have the soul. So if all the body parts cooperate together, then there's health and there's ability to perform actions and engage in devotional service and eventually become liberated from the cycle of birth and death. So in the same way, the body of the society is made up of saintly persons called brahmanas, of administrative persons called kshatriyas, and mercantile and farmers and dairymen called vaishyas, and workers called sudras. It doesn't matter in what varna or what particular designation one is born in. Everyone can make spiritual advancement in the Varnashram system and attain perfection in this lifetime, in one lifetime. So that is the scientific organization of society based on cooperation by following the rules and regulations given by Krishna in Bhagavad-Gita. Okay, so what we see here is sometimes people get a little confused because at one point we say that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. At another point we say that Narayana is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. At another point we say that Vishnu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, I'm going to unravel that apparent confusion. All of these names refer to Krishna, but Krishna has some special quality that we don't have. He can expand himself into plenary or absolute expansions of himself like Lord Balaram, or into partial plenary expansions of himself like the Vishnu forms in the material world. So the expansion is like this. Krishna expands himself as Balaram. Balaram is the first expansion of Krishna. From Balaram, he expands into the first Chaturvyuha, Vasudeva and Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. And then from this first Chaturvyuha, this first expansion of four four-armed forms of the Lord, comes Narayana. And from Narayana, the second Chaturvyuha, again, Vasudeva, Sankarshan, and Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. And from the second expansion, there is the Vishnu expansions, Mahavishnu, Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, and Shirodakshaya Vishnu. And these expansions of Vishnu, who look exactly like Narayana, are for the material creation. So you have Mahavishnu, and then from whose body expands every molecule of his exhalation is an entire universe. And there's millions and millions of these universes that exude from his body. And in each universe, the second Vishnu expansion appears. That's Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. And from Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, he creates diversity in each universe. He enters into each one of the molecules of molecular exhalation of Mahavishnu and creates diversity in that universe. And from the belly button of Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, a lotus flower grows, and on the whorl, or the top of the lotus flower, the mental creation of Garbhodakshaya Vishnu is Lord Brahma, the first living entity in the universe. And Lord Brahma, by performing tapasya and meditation, he hears the flute of Krishna, which illuminates his mind with his purpose and how to transform the chaotic state of that particular universe into an organized system, and he populates the universe because he's the original Prajapati, or progenitor, and then Krishna he impregnates the material nature of that universe with living entities, and Lord Brahma puts into action what's called the Mahatattva, the total material energy, and therefore the ingredients that make up the material bodies of the living entities are created, and the souls are impregnated into the material nature, and then at that point living entities appear. And then in order to organize the entire universe, the third expansion of Vishnu, called Kshirodakshaya Vishnu, enters into every atom of the universe and into the heart of every living entity. That could be aquatics, that could be insects, that could be birds, that could be reptiles, that could be plants and mammals and human beings. Therefore, everything works in the universe in a systematic way, because Krishna expands himself as Kshirodakshaya Vishnu into every atom and into the heart of every living entity. Therefore, everything is synchronized and everything works as if it's automatic in the universe. The planets are held into orbit, perfect orbits. The sun is held into a perfect orbit. For example, the orbit of the sun, by the way, the sun's speed in going around the universal axis, along with all the planets at the same time, is so precise that a little bit of change or irregularity in its orbit would cause havoc in the universe, and it would be destructive. It would be too hot or too cold. So the sun is held in a perfect orbit. The earth is held in perfect orbit around the sun. At the same time, the earth is rotating on its own axis, and it also, due to its rotation around the sun, it rotates approximately 1,000 to 1,200 miles an hour around the sun, on its axis, I'm sorry. At the same time, it rotates around the sun at approximately 20,000 miles an hour. And at the same time, the sun and the whole universe rotates around a universal axis at about 400,000 miles an hour. And all these unbelievable speeds of rotation are perfectly controlled by Kshirodakshaya Vishnu, or Krishna's expansion. And therefore, scientists have all agreed that the universe functions in an organized way. Now, they didn't organize it. Whatever scientists organize requires a lot of work, a lot of research, a lot of money, etc. Whatever they build, it could be buildings, it could be airplanes, it could be rockets, it could be computers. It requires tremendous amount of intellectual organization. Just putting a little Sputnik into an orbit around the Earth, which is an orbit about 400 miles from the surface of the Earth, it required thousands of scientists in Russia and different governmental agencies and a lot of investment to put a 22-pound Sputnik in an orbit for about 3 weeks. And now, fast forward to today, they have the space station, which is also only about 400 miles from the surface of the Earth, and it's cost billions of dollars, and it will only circle the Earth for about 15, 20 years, and it's hardly bigger than the size of a football field. Now, compare that to the moon circling around the Earth circling around the sun, and all the other planets in our galaxy. And there's many more galaxies. And all the movements of these gigantic bodies of stars and suns and moons and planets are perfectly synchronized. Now, who did that? If we can compare the number of scientists, the money, and the research that went into putting a little Sputnik, or later on this space station, and to hold it into space, not perpetually like the sun and the planets, but for a limited time of up to maximum 20, 25 years, to these planets that have been, and the sun, which is a huge orbiting body, and it's emanating countless quantities of light and heat that animates the whole universe. So to claim that whole organization in the universe happened by accident, beginning from a Big Bang, is not only ludicrous, it's irrational, and it has no scientific basis to it, you see. So when we begin to think about the scope and gigantic organization in the universe compared to the tiny little childish experiments and little orbiting space stations and Sputniks that man has done, then we see that there's a much greater intelligence in the universe, much greater organization, much more advanced science, and if we don't accept that, it's because of envy. It's because of a parochial meanness that these earthly scientists have, because they refuse to accept that there's anybody more intelligent than them. But obviously, we can see the result. The result is a perfectly ordered universe. That's one assumption of science. If the universe was not functioning in an orderly way, you could not have science. You could not discover laws like the law of gravity or electromagnetism or thermodynamic laws. None of these things would exist, and everything would be chaotic. The only reason earthly scientists can find things and identify laws and things like that, because they're already been established and they're already functioning in a regulated way. And that cannot happen by accident. So here, the Vishnu Dutas, they ask these questions to test the Yamadutas to see if they actually understand what are the laws of Dharma and what are the laws of karma. Okay, so the next verse, 41, says, the supreme cause of all causes, Narayana, is situated in his own abode in the spiritual world. But nevertheless, he controls the entire cosmic manifestation according to the three modes of material nature, sattva guna, rajo guna, and tamo guna. In this way, all living entities are awarded different qualities, different names, such as Brahmana, Kshatriya, and Vaishya, different duties according to the Varnashrama institution, and different forms. Thus, Narayana is the cause of the entire cosmic manifestation. So here we see the followers of Yamaraj have been taught by Yamaraj to know that Narayana is the supreme cause of all causes, and he controls the entire cosmic manifestation. And in the material world, there are these three modes of nature that control the way people act and keep people entrapped in the cycle of birth and death. So therefore it says, in this way, all living entities are awarded different qualities, different names, such as Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, different duties according to the Varnashrama institution, and different forms. Thus, Narayana is the cause of the entire cosmic manifestation. And then Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport, the Vedas inform us, natasya karyam karanam cha vidyate, natat samas cha vyadikas cha drishyate, parasya shakti vividaya vashruyate, swabhaviki jnanabala kriyacha. Sritasvatara Upanishad 6.8. Narayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is almighty, omnipotent. He has multifarious energies, and therefore he is able to remain in his own abode and without endeavor supervise and manipulate the entire cosmic manifestation through the interactions of the three modes of material nature, sattva guna, raja guna, and tama guna. So here we see how things are being created, maintained by superior intelligence. Narayana is an expansion of Krishna, as we explained. There's Krishna, then the first expansion is Balaram, then from Balaram the first Chaturvyuha, and then from the first Chaturvyuha Narayana, and then from Narayana the second Chaturvyuha, and from the second Chaturvyuha the Vishnu incarnations in the material world, and from the third Vishnu incarnation, Shirodakshaya Vishnu, all avatars appear, like Kurma, Matsya, and Parasuram, and Narashinga, and so forth. Okay, so that's a big topic. We're not going to go over it in any more detail. And so sometimes God is referred to as Narayana because he's a plenary expansion of Krishna. Sometimes he's referred to as Vishnu because Vishnu is a partial plenary expansion of Krishna. And sometimes referred to as Krishna because Krishna is the original Supreme Personality of Godhead, the source of everything. Okay, so this verse says, Narayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is almighty, omnipotent. He has multifarious energies, and therefore he is able to remain in his own abode and without endeavor supervise and manipulate the entire cosmic manifestation through the interaction of the three modes of material nature. So these three modes, sattva, rajas, and tamas, are very important. They control the activities of living entities. We think that we are in control of ourselves. It's not true. We're being forced to do everything. We were forced to be born. No one can say that they chose to be born. We're forced to get old. No one says that they can not get old. We're forced to get sick. No one can say they'll never get sick because it's forced on them. And we're forced to die. So if we're forced to do these things, we are not independent. We do some work and we're forced to get tired. And then we take some rest, then we're forced to wake up and do some more work again. We're forced to blink our eyes. We're forced to breathe. Our heart is pumping on a regular basis. We're not in control of any of these things. We think we are in control, but no. This body is functioning in very mysterious ways. We don't really understand how it's functioning. If we say, well, the doctors understand. They don't completely understand. The doctors have never been able to reproduce blood. There are many miraculous things happening in this body, like the generation of blood is a miracle. And you cannot reproduce blood in a laboratory. You can reproduce different parts of blood, but not the whole thing. Therefore, there's always this demand for, please give blood to the Red Cross, or give blood so that the blood bank will not be lacking different blood types. There are many different blood types also. So there would be no need to ask human beings to give their blood if we could reproduce blood, but we can't. And if you ever figured out how to make it, you would end up being the richest person in the world because it's a precious commodity. But yet your body makes blood. And even though the body is making blood, the scientists have never really figured out how it's happening. Okay, so we see that these modes of material nature control the activities of living entities. So spiritual life is all about transcending the influence of these three modes of material nature. But there's only one way to do that. It's not by meditation. It's by devotional service. And that's what we teach in this temple. How to serve Krishna with love and devotion. If we completely immerse ourselves in that consciousness of serving Krishna with love and devotion, we transcend the influence of the modes of material nature. And that verse is explained in the 14th chapter, 26th verse of Bhagavad-Gita. Mam chayo vipacharina bhakti yogena sevate sagunam samatityaitam brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in devotional service and never falls down, or one who engages in devotional service unfailingly and never falls down, transcends the influence of the modes of material nature and attains the position of Brahman, that is, being free from lamentation and hankering, and acting and developing equality with all living entities, and neutrality, not being disturbed by any condition of material life or of the body or of other people, etc. So when one attains that transcendental platform, free from the modes of material nature, with vision of equality, seeing the soul of people rather than their body, and seeing the relationship of the individual soul to Krishna. That's an eternal relationship. And then developing neutrality, not being disturbed by any duality of the material nature, always remaining calm and lucid, even in the most trying situations. And then treating all people and all living entities equally. This is the whole teaching of Bhagavad-Gita. Therefore it says, these interactions create different forms, bodies, activities, and changes, which all occur perfectly. Because the Lord is perfect, everything works as if He were directly supervising and taking part in it. Atheistic men, however, being covered by the three modes of material nature, cannot see Narayana to be the supreme cause behind all activities. As Krishna says in Bhagavad-Gita 7:13, Tribhir gunamayer bhaver ebi sarvam idam jagat bhavita mohita nabijana timam ebya param avyayam. Deluded by the three modes, the whole world does not know me, who am above the modes and inexhaustible. Because unintelligent agnostics are mohita, illusioned by the three modes of material nature, they cannot understand that Narayana or Krishna is the supreme cause of all activities, as stated in Brahma Samhita 5.1, Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchitananda Vigraha Anadiradir Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam. Krishna, who is known as Govinda, is the supreme controller. He has an eternal, blissful spiritual body. He is the origin of all. He has no other origin, for he is the prime cause of all causes. Okay, so this is the explanation of this verse spoken by the Yamadutas, the followers of Yamaraj. And obviously they've been trained by Yamaraj in knowledge of the laws of karma, knowledge of the laws of Dharma, knowledge of the reason why people get entangled in the cycle of birth and death, and also what is the rightful reward or punishment based on the people's activities, desires, etc. But that's not the whole story. That's why this controversy is here in this episode of the Bhagavatam. The controversy is that the Yamadutas thought that they had a perfect client called Ajamil, who was a sinful person most of his life. But because he uttered the name of Narayana at the moment of death, even though he wasn't meaning Narayana, the Supreme Personality of God, he was calling his last son, his youngest son, Narayana, and then he died. But because he said the name of Narayana, which is non-different than the Lord, Everything of the Lord is absolute. Therefore, his name is also absolute. All the sins of Ajamil were purified. And therefore, he was not eligible to be taken by the Yamadutas to hell and suffer and prepare his consciousness for a lower birth in the next birth. Instead of being a human being, he would end up becoming a dog or a cat or some kind of lowly animal or insect or plant, whatever, based on the severity of his sins. But miraculously, all those sins were eradicated just by saying the name of Narayana. So this shows the power and the glory of the name of God. So the next verse, again, they're answering this question by the Vishnu Dutas, and they're saying, the sun, fire, sky, air, demigods, moon, evening, day, night, directions, water, land, and Supersoul himself all witness the activities of the living entity. That means that we can't get away with anything. Even if you enter your bedroom, lock the door, close all the curtains so no one can look into your room, turn the lights off, and then engage in some sinful activity, still there are witnesses. There's the sun, there's fire, there's sky, there's air, there are demigods, there's the moon, there's the evening, there's the day, there's night, there's directions, water, land, and the Supersoul himself, or Paramatma, all witness the activities of a living entity. Therefore, we can't get away with anything. Whether it's a good act or a bad act, both are being witnessed, and by many witnesses, not just one. In order to be prosecuted for a crime, there has to be a witness, or so much circumstantial evidence that it's irrefutable. Well, now we understand that no one can get away with anything because there are so many witnesses of everything we do. Even though maybe another person, like an ordinary human being, may not see what we're doing, but ultimately the Paramatma, or Krishna in the heart, is witnessing everything we do and everything we think and desire, etc. So in the explanation of this verse, Srila Prabhupada, or Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, says, the members of some religious sects, especially Christians, do not believe in the reactions of karma. They don't believe in the law of karma. We once had a discussion with a learned Christian professor who argued that although people are generally punished after the witnesses of their misdeeds are examined, where are the witnesses responsible for one's suffering the reactions of past karma? Now, in other words, let's say in a previous life one committed some sin, and the reaction to that sin comes in this life. Well, the Christian professor would say, well, we don't accept the law of karma, because if you say that someone committed a sin in a previous life and now they're getting the reaction in this life, where's the witness to that sin? There's no witness. Therefore, you cannot prove your point that karma can go from one life to another. Well, this verse refutes that false premise of the professor. There are many witnesses. The prime witness is God himself, who's in the heart of every living entity, and witnessing and hearing and understanding everything we're desiring and everything we're doing. Number two, there's the sun, there's fire, there's sky, there's air, there's demigods, there's moon, there's evening, there's day, night, directions, water, land, and of course the Supersoul. All witness the activities of the living entity. To such a person, the answer by the Yamadutas is given here. A conditioned soul thinks that he is working stealthily and that no one can see his sinful activities. But we can understand from the Shastras, or Vedic scriptures, that there are many witnesses, including the sun, fire, sky, air, moon, demigods, evening, day, night, directions, water, land, and the Supersoul himself, who sits with the individual soul within his heart. Where is the dearth of witnesses. The witnesses and the Supreme Lord both exist, and therefore so many living entities are elevated to higher planetary systems or degraded to lower planetary systems, including the hellish planets. There are no discrepancies, for everything is arranged perfectly by the management of the Supreme Lord, Swabhavaki Jnanabala Kriyacha. The witnesses mentioned in this verse are also mentioned in other Vedic literatures. Aditya Chandra Vanilo Nalascha, Dior Bhumir Apohridayam Yamascha, Ahascha Ratrischa Ube Chasadye, Dharmo Pijanati Narashya. This is another verse from the Vedic literature that says exactly the same thing as this verse, Canto 6, Chapter 1, verse number 42. Okay, so we'll finish that verse, and now we'll go on to verse 43. The candidates for punishment. Now, these are the Yamadutas continuing to explain their understanding of karma and dharma. The candidates for punishment are those who are confirmed by these many witnesses to have deviated from their prescribed regulative duties. Everyone engaged in fruitive activities is suitable to be subjected to punishment according to his sinful acts. So here, a very important point is being made. That is, we think wrongly, due to false education that we're receiving in schools, and that's due to Darwinism, Marx, and Freud, three nonsense so-called philosophers or political professors, etc., who have poisoned the educational system with their speculative theories. And because of that, we don't accept that there's the existence of a soul that is not a material thing. It's a spiritual, let's say, living principle that animates the body. And we know that for sure, because when the soul leaves the body's dead. No more consciousness. It's just like if you buy a brand new car, let's say you buy a brand new Tesla, but there's no battery in it. It wouldn't go anywhere. Or if you buy a brand new car and there's no gasoline in it, it wouldn't go anywhere. So the energy in the body is not created simply by eating food and digesting food. The energy in the body is coming from the presence of the soul. The individual soul and the super soul both inhabit this body. So a body is made of material energy and spiritual energy. And if the spiritual energy is absent, the material energy is dead. It's not animated without the presence of a soul. Okay, so here it says, the candidates for punishment are those who are confirmed by these many witnesses to have deviated from their prescribed regulative duties. Everyone engaged in fruitive activities is suitable to be subjected to punishment according to his sinful acts. So this concept of fruitive activities means selfish, materialistically inspired activities. In other words, based on false knowledge. The number one false knowledge is to think, I am this body, and two, this whole universe is my field of activity, and I have a destiny to control some of it and enjoy it and exploit it for my selfish desires. So that is a demoniac principle. That's a complete misunderstanding of the universe, of the purpose of life, and misunderstanding of the constitution of the body. This whole universe was not created by men. It's created by God. The whole universe is an expansion of God's energies. He has multiple energies. He has spiritual energies and material energies. Both are spiritual. The material energy is also spiritual because it cannot be destroyed. What is the proof of that? Well, the scientists have got one thing right. There is a conservation of matter and energy. You cannot destroy matter. It simply transforms from one form to another. And therefore, you never have a less matter. It simply transforms into energy, and energy can transform back into matter. So therefore, even the scientists recognize this law of conservation of energy and matter, and the scientists also recognize that you cannot destroy it. You can simply change it from one form to another. So therefore, the material energy is eternal, but all the forms of the material energy are not eternal. Shri Radha Nilamadhava Ki Jai. So, whatever we see in this material world is made up of two major energies. One is spiritual energy, one is material energy. And there are many subcategories of these two types of energies. So, when people have a misconception and think that they can control and exploit some part of the material nature, that's the beginning of their sinful life. And because they're engaged in sinful activity, trying to usurp something that doesn't belong to them, and use the body in illicit ways, therefore they become subject to the laws of karma. So, for example, let's say you get a new cell phone, and the cell phone has its a pamphlet of directions on how to use it properly. Let's say you ignore the directions on how to use it, and eventually, due to ignorance, you break your cell phone from one way or another because of because you don't handle it properly. So, whose fault is that? It's your fault, because you did not carefully read the instruction book. So every manufacturer of a product, it can be a refrigerator, it can be a car, it can be a cell phone, also has a manual of instruction of how to properly use that product. And if you ignore that manual of instruction and you just use your own imagination to make the thing work, eventually you'll break it. You'll make some mistake and you'll break it. This happens all the time. And therefore, there is also a manual of instruction on how to live life, how to attain liberation from the cycle of birth and death. That book is called the Bhagavad-Gita. So if we ignore the Bhagavad-Gita, just like right from the beginning, Krishna says in Bhagavad-Gita, 9th chapter, 26th verse, Patram pushpam phalam toyam yome bhakta prayachati. He highly recommends a vegetarian diet, and he strongly recommends offering food first to Krishna before eating it. Now, if people say that's a bunch of old folklore, and we have our food pyramid given by the United States government, and part of that food pyramid includes meat. Therefore, it's a necessity according to the doctors who made the food pyramid. So people eat meat, they drink some wine, they might drink some liquor, they smoke marijuana, they engage in illicit sexual activity, they bathe or don't bathe, they may or may not brush their teeth, and after a little while they get sick. They have a very poor immune system, they have bad digestive tract, and eventually they get high blood pressure, they get cardiac problems, they get cancer, they get colds, they get styes in the eye. All these little things go wrong with the body. It's because they're ignoring the book of instruction of how this body should be used and how it should be maintained. So the knowledge is there, but people are taught false knowledge, and therefore they abuse their own body, they abuse the machines and the instruments that they have, and it just causes suffering. But when you abuse the body and you abuse nature, then you have serious consequences called the law of karma. So here it says, everyone engaged in fruitive activities, that means selfish activities, where there's attachment to the result for one's selfish interest, is suitable to be subjected to punishment according to his sinful acts. So there's two sets of laws. The one are the laws of the state, and two, even more important than the laws of the state, are the laws of God, which is called Dharma, prescribed duties or occupational duties. If we ignore those duties, or if we don't execute them properly, we engage in sinful activity, and there's punishment. And it's whether it's done willingly or unwillingly, whether it's done with knowledge or without knowledge or out of ignorance, still the reaction is there, because the law is blind. Just like if you may be an innocent child and you accidentally put your hand in a fire, you're going to get burned. The fire doesn't excuse the child. Anything that touches the fire will get burned. In the same way, the laws of nature are blind. Whether it's a little child or an older person, if they ignore these laws given by God, they get karma and they get sinful reactions. Okay, so the last verse we'll deal with today is verse 44, and it says, again, the Yamadutas are speaking, O inhabitants of Vaikuntha, so they're addressing the Vishnu Dutas, you are sinless, but those within this material world are, but those within this material world are all karmis, whether acting piously or impiously. So what does the word karmi mean? It means a person who's acting either piously or impiously. Now, why does it say that, piously or impiously? Because both pious activities and impious activities have karmic reactions. The pious activities, you get a karmic reaction that is positive, but you have to be reborn again to get it. So, therefore, pious activities or impious activities are both negative for a devotee, because both require that one take birth again in order to get those results. In other words, both will keep one in the process of karma. So it says, but those within this material world are all karmis, whether acting piously or impiously. Both kinds of action are possible for them because they are contaminated by the three modes of nature and must act accordingly. One who has accepted a material body cannot be inactive, and sinful action is inevitable for one acting under the modes of material nature. Therefore, all the living entities within this material world are punishable. Now, these are the Yamadutas speaking. Is what they're saying true? This is going to be challenged by the Vishnu Dutas. Their question was, is everyone in the material world punishable? And the way the Yamadutas are presenting their understanding of laws of karma, for them, everyone is punishable. It's just like if you have a jury and they send a letter to a butcher to come in for jury service. Usually butchers are not accepted on juries. Why? Because they always say that the person is guilty. Why did they do that? Because all day long they're killing animals and they're bloodied all the time, and they are inured. They're not disturbed by that ruthless killing. Therefore, for them, everybody is guilty. They want to see blood, whether a person is innocent or not innocent. See? So in the same way, people who have a selfish interest, even if they act piously, that piety is not pure, and therefore there's a reaction that will keep them in the material world. Right? So one who has accepted a material body cannot be inactive, and sinful action is inevitable for one acting under the modes of material nature. Therefore, all living entities within this material world are punishable. Now, we'll see whether the Yamadutas accept their point of view. I don't think so, but you'll have to be here tomorrow to hear the result. Anyway, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, the difference between human beings and non-human beings is that a human is supposed to act according to the direction of the Vedas. Unfortunately, men manufacture their own ways of acting without reference to the Vedas. Therefore, all of them commit sinful actions and are punishable. So here Prabhupada explained the difference. He's saying that people who are properly trained in understanding the Vedic literature know what to do and what not to do. People who speculate and don't follow the Vedas but speculate themselves, just like, for example, in 1962, the Supreme Court justices and doctors speculated and said that the fetus in the womb of a woman is not protected by the Constitution of the United States, and then they made some phony definitions that the fetus cannot be considered a person until it's actually born. Well, that gave them the segue or the possibility to abort children legally by that false definition. So that's just one example. There are thousands, millions of examples of speculative ideas that have been accepted legally and permit sinful activity and decriminalize it. And so therefore there are two laws. There's the laws given by God and there's the laws given by governments. And oftentimes the governments change laws that may have been based on some kind of religious principle earlier to adapt to what they consider as cultural shifts in society and to appease the people. They make things that may have been outlawed previously legal, like marijuana, like abortion, like assisted suicide, like all kinds of different things that have been altered due to shifting cultural norms, not norms, but shifting cultural tendencies, and to appease those people who have become convinced of false conclusions, they change the laws. So here Prabhupada says that unfortunately, men manufacture their own ways of acting without reference to the Vedas. Therefore, all of them, those who have manufactured their own ways of acting, commit sinful actions and are punishable by the laws of nature. Not necessarily the laws of society, but the laws of nature given by God. So we'll stop right there and continue on tomorrow night. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Namaha Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vishnu Srimad.